Wysteria, energy, twister. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. We're still on the Legends of Britany, and we're now going to look at some of the actual legends of Britanny, I guess. Now we've done the chateaux. The dark story of Gilles de Retz. Of the dark and terrible legends to which Britanny has given birth, one of the most gloomy and romantic is the story of Gilles de Retz, alchemist, magician, and arch-criminal. But the story is not altogether legendary, although it has undoubtedly been added to from the great stories of tradition. Gilles is none other than the Bluebeard of the nursery tale, for he appears to have actually worn a beard bluish-black in hue, and it's probable that his personality became mingled with that of the hero of old Oriental story. Gilles de Lavelle, Lord of Retz, Marshal of France, was connected with some of the noblest families in Brittany, those of Montmorency, Roussy, and Craon. And his father's death about 1424, he found himself lord of many princely domains, and what, for those times, was almost unlimited power and wealth. He was a handsome youth, lithe and of fascinating address, courageous and learned as any clerk. A splendid career lay before him, but from the first that distorted idea of the romantic which is typical of certain minds had seized upon him, and despite his rank and position, he much preferred the dark courses which finally ended in his disgrace and ruin to the dignities of his seniority. Gilles took his principal title from the barony of Retz, Oris, the south of Loire, on the marches of Brittany. As a youth, he did nothing to justify an evil augury of his future, for he served with zeal and gallantry, was of Charles, so he wasn't seen as someone who would grow up to be evil. He also went against the English and fought under Joan of Arc, siege of Orleans. In virtue of these services, and because of his shrewdness and skill in affairs, the king created him Marshal of France. Now, when I say he fought against Joan of Arc, he fought with Joan's brother in the fight at Orleans that Joan took when they took Orleans. He fought with them, and if you remember, you'll know that because you'll have probably already heard Joan of Arc. If not, he will have definitely been given the option by now to listen to Joan of Arc. Well, that's her brother that we're talking about here. He fought with her brother. That's why they did not believe he would be evil growing up. But from that time onward, the man who had been the able lieutenant of Jean d'Arc had, well, fought by her side at Jagot and Patay, began to deteriorate. Some years before, he had married Catherine de Thouars, and with her had received a large dowry, but he had expended immense sums in the national cause. Do you remember? Well, we talked about Catherine. She was very close to Joan of Arc, very close indeed. He had expended immense sums anyway in national cause, and his private life was extravagant as that of a prince in a fairy tale. At his castle of Champtous, he dwelt in almost royal state. Indeed, his train, when he went hawking or hunting, exceeded in magnificence that of the king himself. His retainers were tricked out in the most gorgeous liveries, and his table was spaced with ruinous abundance. Oxen, sheep, and pigs were roasted whole, and viands were provided daily for 500 persons. He had an insane love of pomp and display, and his private devotions were ministered in by a large body of ecclesiastics. His chapel was a marvel of splendour, and was furnished with gold and silver plate in the most lavish manner. His love of colour and movement made him fond of theatrical displays, and it's even said that the play or Mystery of Orleans, dealing with the story of Jean d'Arc, was written with his own hand. He was munificent in his patronage of the arts, and was himself a skilled illuminator and bookbinder. In short, he was obviously one of those persons of abnormal character in whom genius is allied to madness, and who can attempt and execute nothing except in spirit of the wildest excess. The reduction of his fortune merely served his peculiar and abnormal personality with a new excuse for extravagance. At this time, the art of alchemy flourished exceedingly, and the works of Nicolas Flamel, the Arabian Geber, and Pierre of d'Estaing enjoyed a great vogue. On an evil day it occurred to Gilles to turn alchemist, and thus repair his broken fortunes. In the first quarter of the 15th century, alchemy stood for scientific achievement, and many persons in our own enlightened age still study its maxims. A society exists today, the object of which is further the knowledge of alchemical science. A common misapprehension is current to the effect that the object of alchemists was the transmutation of the baser metals into gold, but in reality they were divided into two groups: those who sought eagerly the secret of manufacturing those precious metals, and those who dreamed of a higher aim, the transmutation of the gross terrestrial nature of man into the pure gold of spirit. Now, I've done alchemy, I have a degree in alchemy, and it's more a spiritual following actually. Though yes, it is true, alchemy is about getting precious metals from nothing but stones. Yes, but on a whole, actually, what alchemy is about, and there are processes you can go through to do this, is a spiritual process in which to enlighten yourself and enlighten your soul to its highest perfection. It's true that. The latter of these aims was beyond the fevered imagination of such a wild and disorderly mind as that of Gilles de Retz. He sent emissaries into Italy, Spain, and Germany to invite adepts in the science of his castle at Champtos. From among these he selected 2 men to assist him in Plan Prelate, an alchemist of Padua, and a certain physician of Poitou, whose name is not actually recorded. At their instigation, he built a magnificent laboratory, and when it was completed, commenced to experiment. A year passed, during which the necessities of science gradually emptied many bags of gold, but none returned to the marshal's office or coffers. The alchemists slept softly and fed sumptuously, and were quite content to pursue their labours, so long as the Signor of Retz had occasion for their services. But as time passed, that august person became greatly impatient, and so irritable did he grow because of the lack of results, that at length his assistants, in imminent fear of dismissal, communicated to him a dark and dreadful secret of their art, which, they assured him, would assist them at arriving speedily at the desired end. The nature of the experiment was so grotesque that his acceptance by Gilles proves that he was either insane or a victim of the superstition of the time, let's say. His wretched accomplishers told him that the evil one alone was capable of revealing the secret of transmutation of the baser metals into gold, and they offered to summon him to their master's aid. They assured Gilles that Satan would require a recompense for his services, and that Marshall retorted that so long as he saved his soul intact, he was quite willing to conclude any bargain that the father of evil might propose. It was arranged that the ceremony should take place within a gloomy wood in the neighbourhood. The nameless physician conducted a lord of Retz to a small clearing in this plantation, where the magic circle was drawn, and the usual conjurations made. For now, half an hour they waited in silence, and then a great trembling fell upon the physician. A deadly pallor overspread his countenance. His knees shook. He muttered wildly, and at last he sank to the ground. Giles stood by unmoved. The insanity of egotism is, of course, productive of great if not lofty courage, and he feared neither man nor fiend. Suddenly the alchemist regained consciousness, and told his master that the devil had appeared to him in the shape of a leopard, and had growled at him horribly. He ascribed Giles' lack of supernatural vision to want of faith. He then declared that the evil one had told him where certain herbs grow in Spain and Africa, the juices of which possess the power to effect the transmutation, and these he obligingly offered to search for, provided the Lord of Retz furnished the means for his travels, obviously. And this Gilles gladly did, and of course never beheld the Poet Divine knave again. Days and months passed, and the physician did not return. Gilles grew uneasy. It was imperative that gold should be forthcoming immediately, for not only was he being pressed on every side, but he was unable to support his usual magnificence. In this dilemma he turned to Britanny, his remaining alchemical assistant. This man appears to have believed in the art, or he would not have made a terrible suggestion, like he did, which was that the Lord of Retz should sign with his own blood a compact with the devil, and should offer up a young child to sacrifice to him. To this proposal the unhappy Gilles consented. On the following night, Britanny quitted the castle and returned shortly afterward with the story that the fiend had appeared to him in the likeness of a young man who desired to be called Baron, and had pointed out to him the resting place of the hoard of ingots of pure gold buried under an oak in the neighbouring wood. Certain conditions, however, must be observed before the treasure was dug up, the chief of which was that it must not be searched for until a period of 7 times 7 weeks had elapsed, or it would turn into slates. With these conditions Retz would not comply, and alarmed at his annoyance, the obliging prelate curtailed the time of waiting to 7 times 7 days. At the end of that period, the alchemist and his dupe repaired to the wood to dig up the treasure. They worked hard for some time, and at length came upon a load of slates, inscribed with magical characters. Prelati pretended great wrath, and upbraided the evil one for his deceit, in which denunciation he was heartily joined by Retz. But courageous was the signor, that he allowed himself to be persuaded to afford Satan another trial, which meant, of course, that Prelati led him on from day to day with speculative promises and ambiguous hints, until he had drained him of nearly all of his remaining substance. He was then preparing to decamp with his plunder under a dramatic incident detained him. For some time a rumour had been circulating in the countryside that numerous children were missing, and that they had been spirited away. Popular clamour ran high, and suspicion was directed toward the castle of Champtos. So circumstantial was the evidence against Retz that at length the Duke of Britanny ordered both the seigneur and his accomplice to be arrested. Their trial took place before a commission which Retz denounced, declaring that he would rather be hanged like a dog without trial than plead before its members. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. It was told how the wretched madman, in his insane quest for gold, had sacrificed his innocent victims on the altar of Satan, and how he had gloated over their sufferings. Finally, he confessed his enormities, and told how nearly 100 children had been cruelly murdered by him and his relentless accomplice. Both he and Prelati were doomed to be burned alive, but in consideration of his rank, he was strangled before being cast into the flames. Before the execution, he expressed to Prelati a hope that they would meet in paradise, and it is said, met his end very devoutly. The castle of Champtos still stands in its beautiful valley. Many romantic legends cluster about its grey old walls. The hideous half-burnt body of the monster himself, Cis Trollope, circled with flames, pale indeed and faint in colour, but more lasting than those the hangman kindled around his mortal form in the meadow under the walls of Nantes, is seen. On bright moonlight nights, standing now on the topmost point of craggy wall, and now on another, and is heard mingling his moans with the slough and sough of the night wind. Pale, bloodless forms, too, of youthful growth, and mean the restless, unapproached ghosts of the unfortunates who perished in these dungeons unassoiled. may at similar times be seen fitting backward and forward in numerous groups across the space enclosed by the ruined wall, with more than mortal speed, or glancing hurriedly from the window of the fabric, as still seeking to escape from its hateful confinement. Now that's a very wonderful legend indeed, and I can definitely imagine that there are some spooks still trotting about those castle walls, I'm telling you, and that would not surprise me one bit. Thank you for listening to this part, the Legends of Britanny and the dark legend of Gilles de Retz. Many
Wysteria, energy, twister.